Okay, so we're starting a new series tonight called Amazed, and we subtitled it Recovering an Amazement in God. I want to ask this opening question: what is really amazing in our lives today? You think through what's going on in our lives that people celebrate. Maybe technology, like, oh, this new iPhone, it's so amazing, it's waterproof, which all other phones have been like that for 2 years anyway, or whatever else you think is amazing. Or this movie came out, Doctor Strange, it's amazing, you gotta go see it. You know, we celebrate all kinds of things like this as like, this is amazing. We make a big deal about a lot of things. But let me ask this question now: when was the last time you were truly amazed by God? The way you saw Him, the way you thought about Him, what He did in your life? Usually amazement comes with a response, like a pause, like silence, or maybe worship, just celebration of something amazing that happened. Or it comes with like change, like when something amazing happens, you're changed because you saw or you experienced that. Author and speaker Louis Giglio says, unless we see God, we cannot worship Him. If you show up and you're like, I don't know who this God is, I don't know why we should be singing, it would make sense that you wouldn't just jump in. But once you see God and you've seen His impact in your life, that's when it can respond in worship. He goes on to say, when God is not greatly praised, it's only because we don't think He's that great of a God. When our worship is small, I'm not talking just music, when our worship is small, it's because our concept of God is small. When we offer God little bitty sacrifices, it's because we've somehow reduced Him in our hearts to a little bitty God. They're connected with how we see God and how we respond. So the question is, how do we recover an amazement in God? If we've lost that in our life, as we're sitting here and asking these questions and thinking it through, how do we recover that? Well, for starters, it doesn't start with us, really. I want to think that through a bit with you. If we're going to recognize how amazing God is, we have to realize He's the big God of the Bible, and He's the initiator. He makes the first move in this. It's not like, well, I got to push God to make Him perform. No, He's already started this. Look at Ephesians chapter 1, verse 4. Paul is writing in here to the church in Ephesus. He says these famous words. He said, even He chose us in Him before the foundation of the world. That's kind of confusing, but God is the initiator in this relationship. He chose you to be His children. He formed us in His mind and with the world He made. God's the initiator in this relationship. He's not sitting there waiting for you to make the first move. Are they going to pass me a note? Yes or no? Check the box. No, God's already made the first move in this relationship. Ultimately with His Son Christ saying, I'll show you how much I love you, how much I want you. I'm going to sacrifice everything for you. God makes the first move. We just get to respond to that. And we only get a little bit of Him at a time. God is so big that even if He told us everything about Himself, just like I lay everything that's about me on the table, we wouldn't be able to comprehend that. It's just beyond what we could know. It'd be a little bit like a sheep trying to understand the stars in the universe. Like you'd be telling the sheep about, elliptical orbits, and the sheep would be like, bah. Okay? Because when compared to God, that's kind of a good thing. Like sheep, they're not going to know all that kind of stuff. They might be able to look up and see stars and understand a bit about dark and light. And that's the same way for us. When we get pieces of God, we can understand bits of it. We can't understand everything. It's just too much for who we are and for who He is. But there is still so much that we can understand, that we can know. Just because we realize God is so big we can't fully know Him doesn't mean there isn't things that we can know. And in fact, there's enough to know to keep us praising for a lifetime. There's enough that we can know about God to keep us amazed for a lifetime. So the question is, what is He showing us? What has He revealed about Himself? He reveals Himself kind of in three ways. We'll look at a bit of those tonight. The first way He reveals Himself, though, is in nature. We're going to look at how He reveals Himself. What we see, and I can't recall everything He's revealed about Himself and everything He's said, but I'm going to just you give me a few minutes, I'm just going to, brag on God for a bit, okay? This is our God, okay, as we see him in the world and in scriptures. As I said, God is big. And I mean, like, not our size and not even anywhere close to us, okay? He's huge, okay? Come on, I didn't get anything for that? No, I'm sorry. Come on, it's still funny. Okay, it's my Donald Trump impression. God is not made of the stuff that we're made of. He doesn't deal with our limitations, okay? Look at Psalm chapter 90, verse 2. David is writing about God, and in this verse, he makes this description of who God is. He said, before the mountains were brought forth, or you ever had formed the earth and the world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. Before this existed, you were. Like, nobody can say that about themselves except God. It's like everything else and God in his own category. It's just different, not the same. And here's the thing, God is infinite. And what does that even mean, like infinite? We don't have anything here that's infinite. You try to describe it, your brain is like, I'm grasping for words that really try to help me this. Because we don't understand that. Infinite means having no limits. And all we experience in life is limits. Time, we are all limited on our earth. And the amount of muscle we have, no matter how much you go to the gym, you're going to be limited. You can't just like explode of too much muscle, whatever. There's limits to who we can be. But God doesn't have any of those. He has no beginning and no end. He's unbound. He's timeless. He's stuff that we can't comprehend. God's never been tired. He's never slept. He's never aged. He's never upgraded. He's never said, I need God OS 11, He doesn't change like that. He's always been perfect forever. He's self-sufficient. Doesn't need anybody. He's self-contained. God doesn't need anything or anybody. If we all disappeared from the earth, God would still be perfect and in control. If we all chose to reject him and worship somebody else, God would still be perfectly perfect and in need of, or not in need, but in deserving of our worship. His greatness doesn't depend on us. He's not like, oh, I'm so insecure, won't you just praise me a little bit? No, he's not insecure. He's not worried about someone else being greater than him. He knows who he is. His greatness doesn't depend on us. Paul is writing to the church in Rome, and in Romans 11, he says some strong words as we're trying to comprehend who this God is and how that works in comparison to us. If I can turn there. In Romans 11, chapter 11, verse 33, he says, "Oh, the depths and of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments, how inscrutable his ways," which is a good word to look up just for fun and post and make people ask you what it is. You can look it up later. God is like, it's impossible to search through and fully understand who he is. There's so much to him, Paul is saying. Verse 34, he's quoting the Old Testament. "For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor?" It's not like God's like sitting on a couch like, man, things didn't go how I expected. Can you help me with this? No, God doesn't need that. "Or who has given him a gift that he might be repaid?" Like, fruitcake. Yeah, thanks. No, God has everything. He's not like, man, if you could just, give me this, I would feel complete. No, he's already complete. He's infinite in power and wisdom in all ways. We don't come to him bringing something he needs. But it's like my kids bringing their little gifts that they've made. I don't need what they're bringing to me, and yet I love it when they do. I love when they come to me and share. And that's what God is with us when our worship. He doesn't need our worship to feel like he's complete and great, but he loves it when his children come and praise him. Now, science is always growing in its reach and its knowledge. We've done some amazing things during our existence here on Earth, electricity and all that stuff. And we even put a man on the moon. That's pretty amazing. Like if people 1,000 years ago said, what? We did that. But we can't seem to get beyond that celestial body yet. And there are many planets in our solar system, and there are many stars in our galaxy. There's many galaxies in our universe, which makes me think that when we put a man on the moon, God was like, cute, you know? Yeah, I made that for you. Enjoy it. Oh yeah, it's not really that amazing. Wait till you get to this galaxy 1,000 years from now and see what I put over there. God is huge. Isaiah writes about this in chapter 40. I love what he says here as he's talking about this celestial world. He says, chapter 25, "To whom then will you compare me that I should be like him, says the Holy One." Verse 26, "Lift up your eyes on high and see who created these." He's talking about the stars. "Who brings out their host by number, calling them all by name." We've started to discover enough stars that we gave up naming them. We just give them like numbers now because there's so many of them. And yet God in his infiniteness knows them all by name, which I think he probably laughs at some of our names, like Beetlejuice. Who came up with that one? You know, kind of thing. Like, this is our God who brings out their host by number, calling them all by name, by the greatness of his might, and because he is strong in power, not one is missing. That seems to point that God had a purpose for each star. Like he didn't like, oh, I forgot U2378. Oh no. No, each of them was put there on purpose. He knows them by name. Which makes you think, why did God make so many stars? Because we haven't even seen all of them yet. Like we're still discovering what's out there. And I like what one person said about why did God make so many stars? And they said, well, why not? I was like, oh, okay. If you were as big and amazing as God, why not make a universe that echoes your greatness? And people look up, they're like, wow, that's huge. Okay, I won't do it again. But it's just huge. We look up at the stars, and what do we think? We always think, I'm small. Because that's the purpose of the stars, to remind us of how big God is. Now here's one more purpose. Paul is writing again in Romans, laying out these things that God has done. He says, Romans 1, verse 19 and 20, "For what can be known about God is plain for them, because God has shown it to them." Verse 20, "For his invisible attributes, namely his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made." Why did God make this many stars? To show how big he is, to show how great he is, to show his power and his divine nature, that he is God and we are not. Because none of us can say, you see that star up there? Yeah, I made it. No, nobody gets to say that. We all look up and we're like, it's twinkly. No, I don't know, whatever you want to say. But we're always like, that's a huge ball of burning gas millions of miles from me, and it's cool. God chose to make all that to show us his nature. He reveals himself through this world, this universe that he's made. That's one way that God reveals his greatness. Now, God is also amazing in his glory and holiness. Several times in the Bible, we get glimpses of heaven, of what it looks like up in heaven now and in the future. And we find heavenly beings repeating this phrase, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." Which, if you don't like repeating choruses in church music, sorry, that's heaven. It seems like they keep singing the same thing. Like, I'm imagining myself up there, we're singing it the 2 millionth time, like, no, yeah, I'm probably just going to be like, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, as you're just in awe of who he is there. These heavenly beings repeating it, just glorifying him. But this concept of holiness, it's the trait that's exalted above all others in Scripture. Where they go before God, they're like, man, you're so loving. Well, yes, he is. Man, you're so good. Well, yes, he is, but it's all tied up in this holiness, this perfectness of God. God is pure. He's radiant. He's without fault or stain, untainted goodness, perfection personified. That's who God is. Now, I want to come back to the stars. How many of you, hands raised, have seen stars in the sky before? Good job. Excellent job, Joe. Good job. Okay. It's a pretty common experience, especially when you're living in Hawaii, okay? It's so common that we barely look up anymore because we've all experienced it enough times, unless you're Sean, you're looking up every day, you know. But how many of you looked at the stars last night? Now, those of you who did, it was a cloudy night, you didn't see much. But anyway, I looked up last night. My girls got this telescope for their birthday. We haven't been able to use it all week. It's really sad. But we don't look up that often usually. What's going on tonight? Supermoon, which sounds like Sailor Moon to me, but that's a whole other thing. Like, I don't know, I want to like Supermoon, I don't know. It's a weird name. You should look out tonight. You won't see any stars though, because there's going to be a supermoon out tonight. But how often do we look up? And when we do, we usually remark, it's kind of like oh, nice, and we kind of go on with our day. We don't all spend like half an hour just looking up at the stars or whatever, okay? We tend to just, oh, nice. And it made me wonder if that's how we think of God and how we treat him with our life, where it's kind of like, nice, cute, God. Where we just kind of glance at him once in a while, we're just kind of like, yeah, he's still there, he's cool. Where we kind of just treat him with this not that amazing and yet, it's still nice up there. And here's the truth, is that God is more like the stars than we'd actually imagine. When you're far away from God, it seems like this twinkling light. You're like, yeah, this idea of God, who he is, it's cool. Kind of like the stars. When you're far away, it's this cute little twinkling light up in the night sky. But when you get close to God, or when you get close to a star, it becomes a life-threatening experience. It's bright, it's powerful, it's end of life possible, When you get close to God and you see his holiness and his glory and his power, people in the Bible who got close to God or saw him, they fall on their faces, they faint because of who this God is when you get close to him. Just like the stars. There's this one star that comes out every daytime. If I look at it too much, I go blind. Or if I take my shirt off, it like cooks me. That's not a mental image I really wanted to give you. Anyway, it's a powerful thing. It's something we can't live without, which kind of sounds like God. We take the sun for granted as we wouldn't live without it. Same thing with God. We take it for granted. And here's the thing. When we see God for who he really is, the bigness, the holiness, the glory he is, then when we see him in all his beauty, and only then can we really worship him. When we open our eyes and God is revealed to us, we worship and our lives are changed. That's how it works. And when our lives are changed, we're amazed by who God is. We're going to want to share it. We're going to want to help reveal that God to other people. What we need to make all this work is the first step in the process, to see God. It doesn't work. You can't just come to church and fake it. You can't really fake amazed. People can tell that. You can't just, I'm supposed to share, so I better go share. It's not going to come off as authentic unless God has really impacted your life and changed you. We need to make all this work as the right perspective, a greater glimpse of who God is. The reason we love so little is because we haven't seen fully. And the Bible functions in some way as a telescope. And I had a telescope here, but it got taken off stage. My daughter has this telescope. They got to the Imiloa, and they did this special day. They got to make their own telescope, and it's really cool. And they brought it home. They were looking at it every night, and we were looking for different planets and stuff like that. The Bible functions as a telescope, too. It helps us see the details of God. You'll look at the moon tonight and you'll think, that's beautiful, that's amazing. But you get a telescope, you see like craters and different parts of its makeup, and you're like, oh, it's not a piece of cheese. It looks different. We get these ideas of what God is from nature, but we get a clear idea of what God is through this telescope called the Word of God. And so I want to look at a Bible story today from Exodus, the story of Moses, and help us to see a bit more about who God is and his nature. Exodus 33 is a story of Moses. He's already gone up, gotten the 10 Commandments. When he came down, he found the Israelites worshiping that gold calf. He broke them in his anger, so he has to go back up to get a second set from God. And during this time up, he and God are talking, and Moses says something amazing in Exodus 33, verse 18. Moses said, "Please show me your glory," which is kind of a scary thing to say when you realize who you're talking to and how perfect and how radiant he is. But God says in verse 19, God said, "I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you my name, the Lord, Yahweh. And I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy." Verse 20, "But God said, you cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live." Again, like a star, if I got too close to it, I would die. If I stare at it long enough, I burn my retinas. That's why when you have the solar eclipse, you have those little silvery things you have to look through to see. Imagine if you looked at the sun and you died. Like, just don't look up. Don't do it. Don't look at the light. I can't help No, okay. That's how God is. If we saw him completely in all his goodness, he's saying, "Moses, you can't see my face, because you'll die." That's how radiant I am, greater than the sun. Verse 20, "When the Lord said, behold, there's a place by me where you shall stand on the rock. And while my glory passes by, I will put you in the cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen." Which is, I'm thinking, man, I score. I'm going to get to see God. That's going to be awesome. Or you're like, what was I asking for? I didn't know it might cause death. Now I'm afraid for my life, But he's going to hide himself in this little rock crack and cover him. And then as God walks by, Moses is going to get to see him. Something that nobody else gets to do in Scripture. So here's the rest of the story of chapter 34, skipping forward a few verses. So Moses cut 2 tablets of stone like the first. He rose early in the morning, went up Mount Sinai, as the Lord had commanded him, and took in his hand the 2 tablets of stone. The Lord descended in the cloud and stood with him there, proclaimed the name of the Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, this is what God said as he walked by, the Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin. Look at all the goodness of God. This is before the cross. This is already God's character. Forgiveness, mercy, compassion. And it goes on, "But who will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers and the children's children to the 3rd and the 4th generation." This idea that there's this forgiveness and mercy, and yet there's this honest justice that he lives for, that those who have done wrong will pay for that because that is just in the world. This is the character of God, and it passes by Moses, and Moses gets to see a glimpse of God as he walks by. And it goes on at the end of this scene up on the mountain, verse 29, "When Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the 2 tablets of the testimony in his hand, the 10 Commandments, Moses did not know the skin on his face had shone because he had been talking with God. Aaron and all the people of Israel saw Moses, and behold, the skin on his face shone, and they were afraid to come near him." Oh, that's freaky, like X-File kind of stuff, like, whoa. This is how radiant God is, that Moses' face was shining afterwards. If you read the story, Moses has to put a veil over his face for some of his life because people were so afraid of him after these moments where he was talking with God. Now, a couple of things from this story. I want to point out some steps that I see that can work for us. One, this all started with Moses' request. Show me your glory. Moses had his eyes open. He wanted to see God. And 2, put himself in a place to see it, and he got a view. He got God revealed. I'll show all my goodness. What is God's radiance? His goodness. Isn't it fun to be in a room with someone who's good? Just like being in the room with them. It doesn't really matter what you're doing. God is so good that when you're in the room with him, you start to glow afterwards, physically. When we pursue God with great desire, he's going to reveal his glory to us. And then finally, at the end of this process, Moses' life was changed. Not just like, oh, I feel warm and squishy. No, his face shone. Physically, people saw he had been with God, and he was different because of it. Everyone knew that he had been with God. And I think those steps can be something we can use and apply. Let me line out how that works for us. One, I want to call you guys, when you're seeking God, one, to open your eyes. Open your eyes. What I mean by that is be ready to see. How do you do that? It's about desire. It's about passion to see God. When you're seeking something, your eyes are focused. You're looking with intentness. There was a story I have about, I was out kayaking with a friend maybe 10 years ago, out near Richardson's with the bay before, and we were out there in the winter area, and a wave tipped us over and fell out, and while I was in the water and fell out, my glasses fell into the ocean. Now, if you don't know me very well, I can't read anything on that TV. I can't read that thing. Most of your faces I can't make out. There's some black and other colors mixed in there with your eyes. I can't see anything. And so we're just kind of swimming to shore, and I can see the shore, and I can make it. We get in the shore, and I'm like, well, there goes one pair of glasses. And my buddy's like, no, we're going to get our snorkel gear. We're going to go back out there. We're going to find them. And I'm like, dude, it's the winter. It's surgy. There's bubbles. There's rocks. There's probably 10 feet down and some crack. We're never getting it. And he's like, we're going to find them. And I'm like, I'm not arguing with that. We can try it if you want. We've done some diving. We'll give it a try. So we go back, get our stuff, come back an hour later, spend 10, 15, about 20 minutes in. Sure enough, he comes back up about 10 feet down between two rocks and gives me my glasses, which I promptly lose about 6 months later in another kayak accident, but that's another story. Another story, about 7, 8 years ago, my father and I are snorkeling on Kona side. And I grew up snorkeling with my dad a lot, loved doing it, and so it was fun to go out with him again. And it was neat because the first minute we got in the water, within the first minute, 60 seconds, I already speared a nice vecchi, and I was like, yeah, showing off to my dad. But we had a good dive, went out, got some stuff. We're coming back in, crawling over the shallow area. When we get back to the beach, we realize that his wedding ring is missing. And I'm like, oh, my dad's been married 25, 30 years at this point. It's not just like some ring. This is his wedding ring. And I get that look in my eyes like my friend, we're going to find it. And we're like, this is ridiculous. It's a wedding ring in the ocean. We have no idea. Like we thought about, maybe it's on this little shallow area where we climbed over. I always wear gloves, but he was out there barehanded. I'm like, oh, if we go over there, we're going to find it. So we go out there. And this passion is in me. I'm going to find my parents' wedding ring. I'm not going to miss this. And I'm praying the whole time. And so we're scrounging over this area. I mean, who knows? It's a small ring in this reef area. But 5, 10, 15 minutes in, sure enough, I find his wedding ring on a sea urchin on its spine. And with my gloves, I'm able to pull it off and hand it to my father. Which I'm like, yeah. No, and it was God. You know, there's no way you're going to find a ring. You like my little dance? Yeah. A white man cannot dance. Sorry. But that I want to illustrate the passion that we seek with. When you're missing something like that, there's a story in the Bible about the woman who lost a coin, or the shepherd who lost his sheep, or the prodigal son who comes back. Man, we have to pursue God with that kind of passion. Are your eyes open, looking for him, seeking through, not just like, oh, I guess God doesn't have anything for me today. No, are you looking for him? Are you getting into a group that's going to help you discover him? Are you praying desperately to see him? Because that's when you will. Is your life characterized by that kind of pursuit of God? So open your eyes, look for him passionately, and 2, put yourself in a place where you can see him. It's about perspective, too. If you want to see stars here in Hawaii, where do you go? Up on the mountain. My daughter was being a smart aleck first service, and she said outside. Thanks, Anna. When you want to see the stars in Hawaii, you go up on Mauna Kea. That's the best place. Why? Because you got to get away from the clouds. You got to get away from the city lights. That's the best place. We all know how to get to a place. If you're here at church today, almost guaranteed you know how to get to a place. You know how to find ways to hear and see God. But many of us won't put the effort in to get there. Another time. One speaker made an interesting observation too, that the stars shine brightest to the backdrop of darkness. And what he meant by that, it's the same with God, is that We'll see God as holy when we recognize how dark this world is. When we recognize that this world is stained with sin and very unholy, then God shines all the brighter to that backdrop. And we kind of say, that's not a big deal, and I know that's really sin. God doesn't really care about that. It diminishes God's holiness because we've tried to make everything okay. When God stands out greatest, when we recognize that we are not like God. This world is not perfect. Then we can see how truly bright he is. I'm going to ask Justin to take the lights out. Don't freak out. This is my dive light that I take when I'm going for lobsters. It's not amazing. It's not as high as other lights, probably 400 lumens. But at night, in the dark of the water, it's pretty bright. These batteries are even like half used, so it's probably half as bright as it could be. But when it's dark and you turn on this light, it becomes quite a bright thing when you point it in the right direction. You can't even look at it because it's so bright. And it reminds me a bit about who God is, that it's so bright that I can't look at it. And this is only 400 lumens. I've seen lights that are 1,000 and stuff like that. You can go and bring the lights back on. Calling sin sin sets the backdrop for how holy God is. And that's some of this. He's helping us to see what it is to be like God and what it isn't, so that we can see how great it is, how we need him. Open your eyes, passionately seek him. Put yourself in a place so you can see him. Clear the clutter, because the world wants to pump everything else into our ears in front of our eyes and say, this is amazing, listen to this, watch this. And God's like, I have something to say to you if you'll get yourself in a place to hear. And when you do, and when you hear, when you see God, it'll change your life. There's a favorite verse out of Psalms that David writes that I've really connected with my life. Psalm 34, verse 8. He says, "Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good, and blessed is the man who takes refuge in him." David's like, oh, I just wish you could taste and see how good he is. Wish all my senses could just experience God. And one of the later verses in the Psalms, he says, sweeter than honey, which is like pure sugar. Like, it doesn't get any sweeter. God is like that. He's just so good to the taste. And if you see that goodness, you're going to run to that to your refuge. But until you recognize how good he is, we're going to let all other kinds of things into our life to be our towers, to be our refuge other than God. The reason I chose to be in ministry is that I tasted and saw God in some amazing ways, and I desired more. I had some amazing experiences where God was close, and then I was hooked. I was addicted. God drug. Well, maybe that's not quite the way I want to put it here, but you know the idea. It's like when I saw it, I wanted more. Some of my mission trips where God did something that no one else could. Times of worship in churches I was part of where God was so close, I could feel him in my spirit. Recent times where I've had to trust God to take steps in leadership and how he sustained me and my family. Times I was able to share and talk about Jesus and lead someone into his arms. Not my arms, because I'm not good enough. I don't have any saving power, but to lead them into his arms. I keep a list of these moments in my life. Dates, places where I can look back and say, man, God, I remember when you did that. Because I don't want to lose the amazement of who God is. The final thing that happens when we see God, and we open our eyes, and get in a place where we can see him, we actually is revealed to us, we're changed. We worship, we're changed when we see God, and then it should go that we'll need to share it. Our island is one of the best places in the world to see the stars. And I've met people who grew up on this island and never have been to the visitor center on Mauna Kea. I'm like, what are you doing wasting the rest of your life on that? We're going tonight. Like, I did this once at a church, and I found that it was like, I was like, okay. And so we switched some schedules around, and all of a sudden we had a group that was going from our church, and we all went up there that night. And I took them up to the visitor center, not even the summit, just even 9,000. Just get up there at least. We went up there as a whole group, and I loved showing them around, inside, outside, the Milky Way, the telescopes. You can see the craters on the moon and the rings on Saturn. And I'm just excited to share this with them. And the question I had for myself afterwards was, do I do this with God? Am I passionately sharing about who God is, that I'll gather a group and I'll lead them to a place where they can see God. Will I excitedly point out his goodness and all his wonderful intricacies? When we have seen God revealed in all his glory, we'll want to share it with others. I'm not just saying bring them to church. That might help. But man, bring them to God. Introduce them to who he is, what he did in your life. Could be in your small group. Could be something else. Could be just sitting down. Can I read something that I read today that was just amazing? Introduce them to God. If you and I aren't characterized with a passion to share God that we have met and seen, we have to ask ourselves, do we really see him as amazing? Because when we experience something today, something amazing, something awesome, we want to share it. Our first thoughts are, this is going to be an amazing post. I'm going to get so many likes, thumbs up, whatever it is. This is going to be an amazing picture. My Instagram account is going to blow up. It's going to be awesome. And you know what? That's natural. It's good. It's amazing. You should share good things. Probably not what you had for lunch, but amazing things, you should share them, okay? It's human nature to share what's amazing. But if we're not sharing about Christ, I'm not saying every post, every hour, but I'm just saying our lives should be about sharing Christ. If not, we have to admit we're probably not that amazed by him. Or we're ashamed of him. And those aren't two very good choices for us. And I want you and I to change that. And I'm with you. I have a lot of work to do in this too. And so the question is, how do we regain that amazement? Because it starts with that to lead to this. Am I even looking for God? Ask yourself that. Am I passionately seeking, am I asking God to reveal himself? Am I seeking him in prayer, in his word, through my life? 2, is there too much clutter in my life to see and hear God? Do I have my earbuds in, pumping something else into my head the whole time that I couldn't hear anything else if I wanted to, let alone God's voice? Or there are other things that are just cramming your time and your visual, that you couldn't even see God if he was blaring at you. Or if you're passionately seeking God and you're getting yourself, you want to clear out so you can hear God. If you've experienced God's amazingness, am I worshiping him? Is my response to just, man, God, you're awesome. Thank you. I love you. And that takes many forms, not just singing, what we say, what we do. Maybe for you, I've never been baptized. I've never been told the world this amazing God and what he's done in my life. If you want to get baptized, man, I'd love to sit down and talk with you what that means and what an amazing way to worship God that is. Finally, ask God tonight, if you're at the end of this process, who is God calling you to share him with? The treasure that he is. And let's not force them down their throats. Just like, hey, I just want to share with you something cool that happened to me this week. I want to share with you a bit of my life and this God who's really impacted me. It doesn't have to come off as forced.
I see your power in the moonlit night, where planets are in motion and galaxies are bright. We are amazed in the light of the stars. It's all proclaiming who you are. You're beautiful. You're beautiful.